Hello, friends. The events of recent years in Europe clearly demonstrate how complex economic imbalances that have been accumulating for years are transforming into high-profile political maneuvers. February 24, 2024 went down in the history of Polish agriculture as the largest mass mobilization of farmers in Polish agricultural history. 70,000 people simultaneously took part in protests at 250 locations across the country, blocking key highways, blocking border crossings, and the demonstrative dumping of grain from Ukrainian trucks were all accompanied by a single populist narrative. All the problems of the Polish countryside are blamed solely on imports from Ukraine. In this video, we'll break down all these nuances. We have fresh information. Watch the video until the end. Give us a like to support the working class. A like to support aerodynamics is a must. Leave your comments. Bald guys, why aren't you at the front? Why aren't you at sea? Because your comments help promote the videos.
Thank you for your support, but let's get down to business. If we strip the discussion of emotion and turn to the dry facts and figures, a fundamentally different picture emerges.
It's not all Ukrainians' fault. Yes, as much as some people might want to blame everything on them, it's just that time has passed. The emotional intensity of the first protest has long since faded, but the systemic crisis of the Polish countryside has not only not been resolved, but has entered a deeper chronic phase. Data from specialized analytical agencies and government registries over the past 20 years. The year 2026 paints an extremely alarming picture of the financial state of the industry, the dynamics of debt. The total volume of overdue obligations in the Polish agricultural sector has exceeded 645 million zlotys. That is the burden per degree Fahrenheit arm. The average amount of overdue debt has reached 68,000 zlotys.
Next, we have the threat of bankruptcies. Almost 45 surveyed farm owners directly expressed concerns about insolvency.
And bankruptcy is in the near future. That is, we already owe money, and what will happen next is unknown. Plus, there is a drop in income. The real income of the sector has decreased by 44% over the past 12-month period. In a number of voivodeships, the waiting period for repayment of debts to suppliers exceeds 1,200 days. That is, it's 3 years.
And friends, the cherry on top, only 9 farmers rate the current market situation as good, while the absolute majority define it as critical.
The business activity index in the agro-industrial complex has dropped below the level recorded during the global financial crisis of 2008. So the question arises, a fundamental political economic one. If the main source of all the problems for Polish farmers was Ukrainian exports, why is it that 2.5 years after the peak of the protests and the introduction of strict restrictions, does the situation in the Polish countryside continue to rapidly deteriorate? Well, as you can imagine, we will discuss the real reasons for the decline in profitability and not just say that it's all the fault of the Ukrainians and tisk. To understand what's happening, it's necessary to analyze the structure of costs and revenues of an agricultural producer. The main factor behind the financial exhaustion of the Polish countryside is the emergence and expansion of the so-called price squeeze. That is, the divergence between production costs and purchase prices. Next comes the factor of raw materials and energy. As you well know, the basis for the production of nitrogen fertilizers is natural gas. And the geopolitical uncertainty in the Middle East and the restructuring of the European energy market are causing a significant increase in energy prices. As a result, over the recent period, the cost of fertilizers, the basic fertilizers for Polish farmers, has increased by as much as 71%. At the same time, the average purchase prices for grain crops on the domestic market have dropped by 11% year over year.
A situation where input costs rise by almost 3/4, while the final selling price drops by 10%. All of this mathematically guarantees negative profitability. And we definitely need to say a few words about the global grain market situation. Poland is a deeply integrated participant in world trade. A high harvest and record carryover stocks in key agricultural regions of the planet, particularly in Argentina and Australia, have created a steady downward trend on global exchanges. The Polish farmer is forced to sell wheat at low world prices. But production costs, fuel, what we talked about, electricity, logistics, and labor, are paid at high European rates. Next, we have regulatory pressure and the Green Deal, that damned Green Deal. Because the European Union's environmental agenda, the famous Green Deal, imposes serious restrictions.
There are requirements to take some land out of crop rotation, meaning it has to follow strict reductions in allowed plant protection products and more complicated standards. Now preparations are underway for the new budget cycle. The European Union's Common Agricultural Policy for 2028-2034, yes, provides for a cut in direct subsidies, taking inflation into account by almost 40% and a redistribution of funds in favor of meeting strict environmental criteria. Next, we have the climate factor. The hydrological situation in Europe remains difficult. It's 2026 and the summer isn't over yet. The phenomenon of drought, to varying degrees, has affected, well, drought has been different in different places, yes, but it has affected 60% of all Polish municipalities. Polish gminas, which led to a record shortfall in the harvest and a decrease in the quality of grain. None of these four key factors, neither global gas prices, nor the harvest in South America, nor the Brussels directive, nor the drought, as you understand, have anything to do with Ukraine or Kyiv. However, it was precisely the foreign policy factor that was chosen as a convenient media lightning rod. And here we have the next point, friends, the 58 billion paradox. The agricultural trap and profit distribution. There is a colossal economic paradox in this story. Against the backdrop of mass bankruptcies of small farmers, Poland's agro-industrial complex is showing record foreign trade figures.
The volume of Polish manufacturing exports is impressive. The figure of 58 billion euros is striking. Even more, almost 58.5.
The question arises, where does this money end up? This is simply an enormous amount of money. And here we are faced with a classic situation that political economists call the agricultural value-added trap. In the modern value chain from field to shelf, the primary producer, that is the farmer, turns out to be the most vulnerable link.
The main profit margin is concentrated in three segments. These are the large processing sector, international and national logistics operators.
Large retail chains, let's call it retail. The law on regulating pricing in food supply chains turns out to be ineffective in practice against the market power of giant retail chains. Retailers drive down the purchase prices from farmers to a minimum while maintaining high margins at retail at the expense of the end consumer. Instead of systematically fighting for the redistribution of margins within the country, demanding strict control over supermarket markups and lower fertilizer prices, the protest movement was skillfully directed toward the external borders.
What the heck, fertilizers? Do you really think supermarkets are making any money? That fertilizers cost anything? No, absolutely not.
And at the same time, as the economic crisis, a political crisis is unfolding, yes, because events around everyday conflicts, xenophobic incidents in parks, just recently we talked about the attack on teenagers in Bydgoszcz.
High-profile statements from politicians, yes.
All of this demonstrates a dangerous trend. The political elite prefers a strategy of waiting. Why are the officials of the institution silent? What do you think? Write in the comments. But they do have a certain calculation. Any quick reaction before the official investigation is complete, of course, carries political risks. Well, as you understand perfectly well, our dear politicians, and not just ours, really politicians everywhere, not just in Poland, cling to their seats. And the topic of migration, historical traumas, all of this is polarized, and the attempt to defend common sense threatens the loss of votes from the radicalized wing of the electorate. And when people grow tired of inflation, high prices, and the war in Ukraine, my God, how tired the Poles are of the war in Ukraine. With a general decline in the standard of living, aggression is directed at the most vulnerable target. And basically, friends, the conclusion is simple. The situation in Polish agriculture is a clear lesson of what happens when real, in-depth economic analysis is simply replaced with simple slogans. The Ukrainians are to blame. While farmers were being assured that all problems would be solved by closing the borders,
in Brussels, the rules for granting subsidies were being rewritten. Prices were falling on world commodity markets, and retail chains continued to take their good, you could say, lion's share of the profits.
Simple solutions to complex problems never work in the long run. Sooner or later, the numbers and the laws of economics will prevail. So that's the situation. Think, and look deeper into what's going on. And to understand them better, subscribe to the channel. A big shout out to the working class. Greetings to the farmers as well. All right then. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. See you next time. Thank you.